This is episode 15. Today we will be covering the case of Ben Smart and Olivia Hope. This is District Dark. On New Year's Day 1998, two young people disappeared in the Marlborough Sounds. Ben Smart was 21, Olivia Hope was 17. In the early hours after a New Year's Eve party, they were last seen leaving on a water taxi with a lone man. The taxi took them to a boat. They got off. They were never seen again, and their bodies have never been found. Tonight's case is one of New Zealand's most well-known criminal cases. It has lasted for decades because the facts are both simple and hard to settle at the same time. The hard part is everything that came after. Who was the lone man? What boat did Ben and Olivia board? Did key witnesses remember the boat clearly? Did the police follow every lead? And if the right man was convicted, why haven't the bodies been found? Public summaries place both Ben Smart and Olivia Hope at the Furneaux Lodge for a New Year's Eve celebration. They were with friends and family in the holiday atmosphere around Endeavour Inlet when the night ran late and sleeping places became hard to find. Olivia's family remained deeply involved in the case for years. Public reporting later showed that even after convictions were entered, not everyone close to the case felt easy about the way it had been investigated and prosecuted. That became a part of a long life of this case. But at the beginning, the story was simple. Olivia and Ben were two young people who vanished after boarding a boat. Marlborough Sounds sit at the top of New Zealand's South Island. They are full of waterways, coves, inlets, bush-covered hills, and summer boat traffic. Holiday crowds move through the area by launch, yacht, taxi, and shore party. On New Year's Eve, the place is busy, social, and spread out across the water in a way that makes movement easy and tracking people hard. That setting matters because the last known movements of Ben and Olivia did not happen in one fixed building or on a city street. They happened in a floating holiday world where people move between shore and boats in the darkness after midnight. That made the final timeline harder to lock down from the first day. On 31 of December 1997, the Furneaux Lodge was hosting a large New Year's Eve party. Public summaries say there was roughly 1,500 to 2,000 people in the area. That number matters because it tells you the kind of night this was. Loud, crowded, social, and full of movement. Boats were everywhere. People were drinking. Friends were crossing between shore and moored vessels. Some had arranged sleeping places, some had not. As the night turned into early morning, the problem of where people would end up sleeping became a part of the story. That was true for Ben and Olivia as well. At this point in the timeline, nothing looked like a murder case yet. It looks like a summer party that has gone on late. This is important because what comes next happens in a setting that feels normal to the people inside it. As the party wore on, Ben and Olivia were still in the area around Furneaux Lodge and nearby boats. Friends were coming and going, sleeping arrangements were changing. One of the key boats in the story is Tamarack, because people connected to Ben and Olivia were using it that night. By the early hours of the 1st of January, the group had reached the point where some people were trying to settle down for the night and others were still moving between vessels. This is where the water taxi enters the case in a major way. Guy Wallace was a water taxi driver. In the early hours of the 1st of January 1998, he was operating the Naiad. His role in this case became central because he was the last known person to see Ben and Olivia alive. According to court appeals summary, Wallace took Amelia Hope and her friend Rick Goddard to the boat Tamarack. Also in the taxi were a lone man and another young couple, Sarah Dyer and Hayden Morrissey. After Wallace dropped off Amelia and Rick at the Tamarack, Ben and Olivia took their place in the taxi because there was no room for them to sleep there. The lone man then offered them a place on his own boat. That point matters because it is the exact moment when this case turns. Before that, Ben and Olivia were just part of a holiday crowd. After that, they were in the company of one man on the way to a boat that was not theirs. Sarah Dyer and Hayden Morrissey were important because they were also in the Naiad during the last trip. Their presence helped confirm that the lone man was real and that the final movement off the Tamarack and toward another boat did happen. This matters because there is no real dispute that Ben and Olivia left with a lone man. That part is one of the strongest fixed points in this case. The later legal fight was not mainly over whether it happened. It was over who the man was and what boat he took them to. So as the taxi moved across the dark water, the case had already narrowed without anyone knowing it yet. Ben and Olivia were no longer part of a big crowd. They were part of a much smaller scene. One taxi driver, one lone man, one final boat. Wallace drove the taxi to a boat moored among other vessels. Ben Smart, Olivia Hope, and the lone man got off. That was the last confirmed time either Ben or Olivia were seen alive. That is a key recurring fact in this case, and it stays important all the way through. No one came forward later to say they saw them alive after that point. No later sighting replaced the water taxi trip as the final confirmed event. Everything after that had been built from witness memory, boat evidence, forensic evidence, and police reconstruction. From the start, the boat itself became a major issue. Wallace told police he believed he had dropped Ben and Olivia onto a wooden two-masted ketch. On the 3rd of January, he drew a sketch and wrote 38 to 40 foot ketch under it, underlining the question. He described the boat as well-kept timber with thick blue stripe and round portholes with brass surrounds. The description would later become one of the most debated parts of the whole case. At this stage in the story, though, it simply mattered because the police were trying to find the last boat Ben and Olivia had boarded. A boat description was one of the only practical clues they had. So in the first days, the case had these known points. Ben and Olivia were missing, they were last seen with a lone man, and the final boat was described as a ketch. As the morning continued and people expected Ben and Olivia to reappear, concern began to grow. They had not made it back to friends, they had not turned up after the party, and the last known account placed them in care of a man no one clearly knew. This is where the case changed from confusion to alarm. A young couple missing after a busy holiday night might still, at first, be written off as sleeping somewhere else. But once enough time passed and no one could account for them, police had to begin from the final taxi and work outward. Police launched a major investigation. Detective Inspector Rob Pope took charge on the 5th of January 1998. The inquiry became Operation Tam, named after Tamarack. Public summaries say the investigation involved a large number of interviews, public appeals, and months of searching through the waters around the Endeavour Inlet and nearby areas. Despite all that, no bodies were found. The investigation had to rely heavily on witness memory and forensic traces, and that shaped everything that came later. The Marlborough Sounds are not easy grounds for a simple search. The area is full of inlets, changing water, moorings, private craft, shorelines, and deep holiday traffic. A case like this does not leave one obvious road route or one fence scene. It spreads over water, boats, and memory. That means even a major search can still leave huge gaps. If a crime happened on a boat, evidence could be moved. If bodies were dumped, recovery could be extremely difficult. And because the parting setting involved many vessels and many people, police had to sort through a large amount of movement from one crowded night. As the investigation continued, police kept coming back to the same point. Ben and Olivia were last seen with a lone man. That made the case, as its center, a question of identity. Not whether Ben and Olivia vanished, not whether they had boarded a boat, but who the man on the boat was. That is why the witness evidence became so important. The case needed a name to attach to the final trip. Without that, the investigation could not move from search into accusation. Months into the investigation, police focused on Scott Watson, a Picton man who owned a boat called Blade. He was arrested on the 15th of June 1998 after a long investigation. This is the point in the timeline where his name enters the story. Before this, the case was about two missing people, one water taxi ride, one lone man, and one mystery boat. From here on, police said that lone man was Scott Watson. The major problem was the Blade did not match the boat Wallace first described. Public summaries described Blade as one-masted steel-hulled sloop, not a two-masted timber ketch. It had no portholes and no blue stripe. That mismatch became one of the biggest issues in the whole case. That matters because the prosecution would later say Watson was the lone man who took Ben and Olivia away. But if the final boat was not his, the case has a serious problem. So from this point on, one of the biggest fights in this case was between the witness description of the mystery ketch and the police claim that the final boat was Watson's Blade. Police did not focus on Watson only because of the boat. The Crown later said the total case against him rested on a combination of witness evidence, timeline evidence, forensic evidence, and later statements. The Court of Appeal in 2025 said the key issue was whether Watson was the lone man with whom Ben and Olivia boarded a boat the last time they were seen. So police were not only asking whether Blade matched Wallace's sketch, they were asking whether the man in the taxi matched Watson and whether other evidence placed Ben and Olivia on his vessel. Wallace later ID'd Watson from a police photo montage. That identification became one of the most important and most disputed parts of the case. In 2025, the Court of Appeal reviewed whether Wallace's identification should have been excluded and decided it was properly admitted. But public reporting also shows why the issue stayed controversial. Wallace later said he believed Watson was innocent and that the police had misled him with photographs. Public summaries say he maintained that view until his death in 2021. Oversight criticism later said the photo montage breached rules badly enough to expose the investigation to criticism. So this part of the case has always had two sides in public record. The court accepted the identification evidence, but the method used to get it drew serious criticism. The other major part of the case was the hair evidence found on the blade. 2 long blonde hairs were found on Watson's boat. In 2025 ruling, the Court of Appeal said one hair gave very strong support that it belonged to Olivia, and the second hair gave strong support that it belonged to Olivia or a maternal relative. The case said the newer science made the case for a link even stronger than it had been at trial. This mattered because there were no bodies. So if Olivia's hair was truly on the blade, that became one of the few direct physical links between the missing pair and Watson's boat. The hair evidence was attacked for years, including on the grounds of contamination or transfer. The Court of Appeal reviewed those arguments and rejected them, saying the contamination theory was extremely unlikely and that there was no miscarriage of justice on the hair evidence. Another important witness was water taxi driver Donald Anderson. Evidence accepted that both sides placed Watson back at the blade sometime between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. after a separate trip. That created a difficulty for the Crown. If Watson was already back on the blade, how did he become the lone man later seen taking Ben and Olivia away? The Crown answered this with what became known as the two-trip theory. It argued that Watson got back to shore again after Anderson dropped him off at Blade, then later met Ben and Olivia and took them out. The Court of Appeal in 2025 said the evidence did not rule that out as a reasonable possibility. That theory has always been important because it filled the gap in the timeline. It was one of 2 points where the prosecution case had to ask the jury to accept a sequence that was possible even if not directly observed from start to finish. Scott Watson's trial ran from June to September of 1999. Public summaries say the Crown called about 488 witnesses and the defense called 26. It was one of the biggest and most watched trials in New Zealand. The Crown case said Watson was the lone man. Ben and Olivia boarded his boat. Olivia's blonde hair were found there, and the circumstantial case as a whole proved guilt. The defense said the witness identification was flawed. The final boat description did not match Blade. The physical case was weak, and the police had built the wrong case around Watson. 2 prisoners gave evidence that Watson had confessed while on remand. Public summaries later said one of those prisoners later admitted he lied, and another had been given the use of a car and cell phone by police for his testimony without the jury knowing. This is one of the reasons this case never stopped being argued over. In September of 1999, Watson was convicted of the murders of Ben Smart and Olivia Hope. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. He has always maintained he is innocent. That verdict settled the case in court at that point. But the public did not stop debate because the bodies had still not been found. The mystery catch issue remained alive, and many people still had questions about the investigation. Watson's first appeal was dismissed in 2000, and later efforts also failed. But the case remained active for years through fresh interviews, journalism, books, and official complaints. In 2010, a complaint to the Independent Police Conduct Authority led to a report that was highly critical of parts of the investigation. It said the photo montages exposed the investigation to criticism and that police failed to properly pursue some mystery catch leads. The criticism did not overturn the case, but it did make clear that the case had serious weak points in the way it was built. In September of 2025, the Court of Appeal declined to quash Watson's conviction. It found no miscarriage of justice on the hair evidence or Wallace's identification evidence. The court said that when the whole body of evidence is considered together, the catch issue becomes much less important. That ruling is the latest major official answer in the case, but it is not the last legal step. In March of 2026, the Supreme Court granted Watson leave to appeal on part of the identification issue, so the case is still active in the courts. After all the legal fights, some facts remain exactly where they were from the start. Ben Smart and Olivia Hope were last seen alive in a water taxi with a lone man. They boarded a boat. They were never seen again. Their bodies have never been found. That is why this case still feels unfinished, even after conviction. The courts may rule on guilt, but the water still holds the part of the story no one has ever recovered. That Ben Smart and Olivia Hope never came home.